How's it going, guys? It's me, Greg Slade. I was just reaching out to you guys because when we have our next meeting, will obviously be today, December 2nd. I'll be at a basketball game. I've got to coach my team. We'll have a game. We actually start around the time our meeting starts. So I reached out to Diane, tried to come up with some creative ways to be a part of things and still kick the meeting off without a hitch. And so I came up with this idea to perform a recorded message for you guys. As we know, this month is my month to kind of present for lesson plan, and wanted to be sure that I did that and was able to share this with you. So I certainly appreciate you guys coming. I know we're coming off a Thanksgiving weekend, and this week break was perfect for us. It was right on time, refreshing. But this week is also a big week for us basketball wise. We kick off season usually this week. So, we went down to North Hollywood High School. We were down there Wednesday, night before Thanksgiving, I want to say, and played a game. It was pretty great event there. And we also had a game out in Roseman, California. So that's out near here in the high desert. And then had Thanksgiving, of course, and the festivities were good. Spent time with family and caught up with how things have been going with some of my brothers-in-law, my brother, mom and dad, and all that was good to see. So hopefully you guys did the same and you weren't run too ragged, and we were able to get some rest in, guys. So um, with that being said, I wanted to be sure to get this going here. So let me see if I can figure out how to share. Perfect. So what I'm going to share with you guys is my lesson plan for number two. Let's see. There we go. I think we got it. Awesome. Perfect. Okay. I chose lesson plan number two in particular because this lesson plan for this month, I actually did this lesson a few times this week for this particular month, and I felt that I got better each time I had done it. I recorded the one that I shared with Diane originally. That was my first time doing it, but the other three times I did it after with my other classes, I felt like I got a little bit better at understanding the flow and getting a good rhythm in it. What we did was a pacer test to test their physical fitness. In particular, we wanted to highlight some aspects outside of the normal just running of the pacer test. For those who've done the pacer test, I know there's video instruction on YouTube through FitnessGram. The actual runtime of the test can vary, but it was a very short amount of time considering the amount of time that we needed for the lesson. So I had to think of other ways to try and incorporate other aspects that highlighted the importance of the pacer test, that highlighted the importance of endurance training as well as aerobic endurance, which the pacer test tests. So we'll kind of dive into the things that we wanted to use, what we did to set the lesson up, go over some objectives, and go from there. So within the pacer test, I wanted to highlight the importance of heart rate. We wanted students to be able to check their heart rates through three different areas throughout the test. Prior to starting any activity, this is prior to warm up, we asked them to check their resting heart rate. We identified what that was. We identified exercise heart rate and recovery heart rate. These were also vocabulary terms that we would have listed on our whiteboard next to our word wall, incorporated with our word wall, rather, for students to refer to as they kind of continue to go and work in small group, as well as write out any thoughts or other parts and other aspects of the written lesson, for a portion of the pacer test that we did. Um, we identify heart rate through also giving it also another name, which was pulse rate or beats per minute. We refer to all three of those as being the same thing, and we gave them a formula on how to calculate their heart rate. We highlighted first what was a normal range. So at rest, 60 beats per minute to 100 beats per minute, we consider normal. Anything higher than 100 or anything lower than 60, there may be some things contributing to that, whether that be anxiety felt at that time, or maybe you're an athlete, you're in really, really good shape. There's some different factors that may also exist. There might be some physical ailments, different things like that, where students are really pushing hard. But ultimately, we told the students to basically find their pulse either on their wrist or just under their jawline right here. We had them take their two fingers here, put it up in the jawline or on their wrist right here, and just try and check and see if they felt for their pulse. We had them count the number of pulses for 15 seconds. So there was a timer posted. I used the gym, so I used the timer on the scoreboard, so it was big enough for everyone to see inside the gym. They counted the number of pulses they felt in one of those two areas for 15 seconds, and then they multiplied that number by 4, and that became what we would identify and define as our pulse rate formula. And so they used that formula at rest prior to starting activity. They used it again immediately following their run time during the pacer test, and they did it again a third time during the conclusion after their cool down was finished. Um, in this, we did grades 9 through 12, 32 minutes was our time frame. In the standard, we chose a standard number 2, students achieving a level of physical fitness for health and performance while demonstrating knowledge of fitness concepts, principles, and strategies. 2.2, engaged independently and physical activity that increased aerobic capacity specifically. So as we went through the pacer and we highlighted what the pacer acronym stood for, it was important to understand that that pacer test was a part of the California standards within our physical education experience here at the high school. So um, the content learning goals, we came up with 6 learning goals and outcomes that we hoped would come from going through this lesson. And many of the students did actively participate, which helped me understand that they kind of understood what was being asked of them, and they also kind of had some fun taking part in it outside of just the running. So um, our learning goals specifically were we wanted students to understand the importance of their cardiovascular endurance, how the pacer test measured that component of fitness. We also wanted students to be able to identify and practice warm up and cool down exercises to help prepare their bodies for the test. We highlighted the importance of priming your body for activity. So that was huge for them to learn and understand. Also, students, we wanted them to learn how to properly calculate their heart rate. So that's what came up with the heart rate formula. Students to learn how their heart rate is affected during heart exercise as well as during rest. So again, their normal ranges would vary depending on the level of activity and exercise they were doing. Cardiovascular fitness wise would either increase their heart rate or it would start to gradually drop as they were getting closer and closer back to rest. Students would gain a greater understanding of the vocabulary terms that were emphasized during the lesson. These were terms that were listed on a whiteboard through in the class that was near the testing area. This was also projected on a big, large screen projector inside of the gym. As part of a PowerPoint presentation, there was a page or slide that had these particular terms listed on there as they would come up as we had discussions during the test. We also wanted students to participate in group discussion on the importance of their regular fitness assessment, how they could guide their how the results could guide their personal fitness journeys. So that was sharing data, sharing results based on their personal goals as well as the goals that us as a PE class had for them. So that was huge. We wanted students to be able to identify 3 strengths. We wanted them to be able to exchange information and ideas while collaborating with others during discussion. We wanted them interacting with others in written English in various communicative forms, whether they were writing, they were using Google Classroom for their technology, emails, or also using different multimedia or apps outlets, different things like that were available. What we chose to go with as a class was Google Classroom. We opened up a class comment section for students to chime in on as they were kind of preparing for this and as they went through their moments to have short, small group discussions. Let me see. We really wanted to highlight for them the goals of the vocabulary development as well as like using like their task or their what was their purpose in doing this test. Yes, it was a test that we mandated, but it's also a test that would help them understand how their body is reacting during physical activity. And so with that came these ELD learning goals. Vocabulary development. Students will learn key vocabulary related to the PACER test, such as endurance, pace, cardiovascular, warm up, and cool down in both spoken and written forms. There were many other vocab terms that we used as well that highlighted three areas of psychological effects that were felt either before the test, during the test, or after the test, as well as vocabulary terms just in general on pacer itself, what is cardiovascular endurance, things like that were also part of the vocabulary development that students were able to speak about as well as refer back to as a resource on the whiteboard. Listening and comprehension. Students will demonstrate the ability to understand and follow oral instruction given by the teacher regarding PACER tests, including safety protocols and pacing strategies. This was done with not only the PACER guide on YouTube from FitnessGram, but as well as prior to even going into that, giving them sound instruction on what it was that they were doing for the day. When I brought them into the gym, I explained to them they were taking a PACER test. And at that time, we did somewhat of a prior knowledge check for them to see who was familiar with the pacer. Do they recall it, running it back in ninth grade or even eighth grade or seventh grade? Maybe even like going into a deep dive on what they thought about it. Was it something they felt was beneficial to them, or was it something that they felt was a waste of their time? Just trying to get them to engage with me, showing them that I'm willing to actively listen while also demanding that out of them as well. And then comprehending what the instructions were. The test is very simple to set up, but sometimes kids can kind of get lost. They may even feel different things kind of motivating them, maybe things outside of class, maybe bothering them at that time where paying attention could be difficult for them. So making sure that they understood that was tested throughout this test. Their speaking skills, students were asked to engage in small group discussions, sharing their personal experiences and strategies that they use related to the PACER test. We wanted them to be able to share their results. This came at the form of the data that they had taken with the results theme that was driven within that discussion. We had separated this test from the boys and the girls. We did a boys test only, and of those boys, I want to say about 25% of the students in that class were athletes in different sports: wrestling, football, volleyball. I even want to say there was a couple of track kids there too. So they kind of innately kind of had some competitive spirit about them. We set a goal for boys in particular to reach a pacer scale of 42. So as they got closer and closer to those goals, we started to find them just kind of really placing in a demand to finish and at least achieve the goal. We even had a few students after they made the goal, we stopped the test. Once we hit 42, they had asked to continue to go just to see who could outlast the other. So that was kind of interesting to see in their speaking discussions. The written skills, students were to complete a reflection through use of a 3-2-1 exit ticket, which we used as a formative assessment on student knowledge and what they were able to gain and take from the lesson. I'll go into that and what was detailed in the 3-2-1 exit ticket later, but ultimately that's what we were looking for as far as their ELD learning goals to support them. Content of the lesson based on student assets. What did I expect for them to deeply understand? One was just how to perform the test. How do you actually conduct the PACER test and do it effectively? Two, I expect the students to retain the importance of their cardiovascular endurance and cardiovascular health in general, how it contributed to their overall health as well as their athletic performance. And three, I expect students to be able to identify at least 1 to 3 psychological aspects of endurance testing, including how they stay motivated to push through their mental fatigue as well as physical fatigue. These were things that were highlighted. Some of these psychological effects were highlighted prior to the beginning of the test of things that they might feel. So during my discussion and presenting the lesson to the students, I had a list of different psychological effects that may occur. It wasn't necessarily what they felt, but there were things that they may be able to identify with, things like anxiety prior to testing, a nervousness, or being goal oriented, no matter what, I'm going to get my goal of 42. And then also like their sense of relief. Oh my gosh, the test is over. Like all of those things may have been psychological effects that they experienced throughout the time of the test that I wanted them to be able to understand, highlight, and understand how it affected them during their performance. In terms of student strengths, we wanted to also make them aware of their misunderstandings or misconceptions about certain things. For example, what exactly is their pulse? Um, how do they perform a heart rate check accurately? Um, do they know which areas to truly check? Is it the left jaw line, and is there a difference in checking the right jaw line in terms of the pulse they feel? Students may have misunderstandings about the heart rate formula itself. Multiplying the right number, filling the number of pulses, do they have an accurate number of that? Also, the amount of time used to check the pulses. Did they do it for 15 seconds or 35 seconds? They had to be able to understand those are misconceptions and misunderstandings about that. Any misunderstandings on how to perform the pacer test? Are they stopping at the right and appropriate area? Are they pacing themselves according to the demands of the test? Is it getting more difficult for them? If so, is it getting difficult later toward the end of the test or earlier during the beginning? Also, misconceptions about what PACER stands for. What is the PACER test? What does PACER stand for them? And wanting to go over those things. So those were things that we wanted to identify that they may have misunderstandings or misconceptions about that could get in the way of them accessing their assets to be able to perform. Their knowledge and skills and abilities or higher order of thinking using academic language that I expected for them to engage in was for them to be able to express how the heart rate could be calculated to one another, what it meant during recovery, during physical activity. Um, when calculating their heart rates and understanding that at rest it might be between 60 and 100. During exercise it'll be elevated and higher than that, but as they come down in recovery it should get closer to what their resting heart rate was a trend that we were looking for in their checks. So as they had data from checking the heart rates during those 3 times, they had a chance to basically calculate and discover what their other peers were kind of doing or not doing, how effective they were in their physical activity time versus how ineffective they were if they chose to not run it or take it seriously. So it made for good discussion for them. We also wanted students to be able to define vocabulary terms such as pulse rate or resting heart rate or exercise heart rate, cardiovascular endurance, what a warm up was, a cool down was, as well as what the pacer is, in order to further develop the ELD goal for them, as well as the psychological aspects of the endurance test, such as social supports, maybe goal setting approaches that they had. If their fatigue management through mindset and having a strong mindset or willpower to push through and achieve resilience. These are all psychological aspects that they may have felt, and we wanted them to be able to have a deeper understanding with that as they had dialogue in their small groups. What essential questions will you ask to determine if students are not yet meeting, or exceeding learning goals of the lesson? Um, we tried to do this by using a 3-2-1 exit ticket. We wanted to determine this through a formative assessment to check their understanding and see if they're meeting the goals. So we asked them in the 3-2-1 exit ticket. We did this at the very end, and we provided 2 ways for them to turn this in. There was a worksheet that they could fill out right then and there, or there was a Google form that we had them scan a QR code and they could do that and turn in on Google Classroom. We asked them to define 3 vocabulary terms that were covered during the lesson. We asked them to identify 2 psychological aspects of endurance testing that they experienced during the test. This might have been either before the test, during the test, or after the test, where they felt 2 of these psychological aspects, and also list 1 area of improvement that they could try to achieve the next time we had to run a PACER test. In asking those questions, we found that a lot of the students really enjoyed some of the aspects, the psychological aspects of things that I anticipated were affecting them early on, kind of dissipated as they got active. Some of the anxieties felt prior to the test. A lot of comments were made about being discouraged from having to run, but once they got started, they were very happy that they achieved the final result of finishing. Students, what will the students do to demonstrate their achievement of content during the lesson? Students will demonstrate the ability to check the heart rates, define key concepts and terms. 3 different people in the group were given an opportunity to discuss and present key concepts or definitions an example to the small groups that they were working in. So we chose group leaders. I went around as the groups kind of were openly discussing, and I would just ask students, one person in from the group, to explain one of the concepts that they identified with from some of the psychological aspects, if there were any that were different than what was listed. We also asked them about vocabulary terms, and also asked students to check the heart rate and explain to me what the heart rate check was, how the formula was used, and what exactly it was testing. So it made for a good outcome for them. Um, I was gonna know that content goals were being met based on the 321 ticket exit ticket results. Students being able to define the vocab terms, being able to identify psychological aspects felt during the message. I'm sorry, during the lesson, and giving an idea of what they could improve on. I felt was a good way to test formatively and quickly. In that type of a setting, to see if they're meeting the goals and goals are being met. If students were having any struggles where they couldn't, they would be able to tell so. And then there was no incentive on them getting a wrong answer. It was their answer. It was just pretty much, hey, if you get this turned in as part of the lesson, you'll get your points. But it allowed me to see where they were at, what they thought of themselves, in order to fully address it as we continue to develop, cardiovascular endurance. This also helped test ELD goals, 321 exit ticket, by them offering input, having the group discussions and monitoring those discussions, and then also answering the guided questions that I might have had during the group roundtables where I went around and was asking them specific things within the content. Students were able to also give me their written responses through the 321 exit ticket that followed PACER instruction. It helped me be able to see what goals were needed, that they were formulating complete sentences, they were using the vocabulary terms correctly when they were defining them, and there was no real mix-ups when highlighting some of the comments made from other peers about their data, and stuff like that, just making sure it was flowing good. So in terms of structured student learning activities based on student assets, what activities will the students be involved in during the lesson to support, engage, and challenge their achievement and content learning goals? Students were asked to read and listen to the instructions to support understanding of the PACER test. Those instructions highlighted what the PACER was and why it was important for cardiovascular health. Students will read instructions on the lesson and follow guides on heart rate calculation and checks. And students will engage in warm up and cool down activities during the lesson to support their understanding of how the heart rate is affected by exercise, rest, and recovery. What activities will English learners, including those who are fluent in English, proficient, engage in and challenge their achievement of ELD goals? We used a vocabulary word wall. We had a word wall that was present on the projector screen as well as on a whiteboard that we used for the entirety of the lesson. Um, these words were used, they were English, they were in English, but we also allowed for talk to text as well as some Google Translate to be used on phones. Some students were able to actually take screenshots of the word wall, process them through Google translation, and they were able to interact in their native tongue with each other in small groups. I did have about 4 students who are considered English learners that did work together. There was 1 or 2 of them who were somewhat proficient English wise that were able to kind of translate instruction as they got it, which did help them. But when they had to work independently, I found that that's where they had a lot of good results. They knew where to go for the resources. They knew how to go about trying to get access to definitions, referring to psychological aspects, lists of different things that they may felt. All of those things kind of showed their head as we finished in this PACER test and got through this lesson. We paired the groups fairly randomly to just kind of discuss their results through the test. They could do this in their preferred language, whether it was their native tongue or English. But it encouraged a deeper comprehension and reinforced the use of language in general for them to go toward the ELD goals. How will you group students to manage group work? Again, we kind of did it based randomly on proximity. Students who were close by, we had them go in groups of 4 and discuss what they had as results for their PACER test and what they got in group discussion. was pretty much what kind of drove the class in their competitiveness. Like again, we set the goal for boys to be 42. Most of these boys, about 25% of those boys were athletes, did various sports. And so they had a really fun time discussing, competing. There were a couple who did not make the goal, and those guys kind of got made fun of in a very joking and light way. But it was a way for them to kind of embrace, the whole process and have fun within the lesson. After completing the PACER test, we did have students engage in discussions together, again, going over their data and their performance. We also asked them uh, teacher prompted or guided questions such as what factors might have influenced their performance today. Did they eat? Did they have energy for it? Did they, drink water, plenty of water? Were they hydrated? Did they get enough rest the night before? Do they think that those things ultimately impacted their results? These were some questions that I gave to the groups, let them discuss on a timer based situation. So we timed these discussions for about 3 minutes. Then we rotated and we had certain students go to other groups and discuss what the previous group talked about, which made for a very strong collaborative effort in that discussion. It also highlighted higher orders of thinking and gave them opportunity to analyze the data as well as interpret what it was for each group and each person involved in the group. The instructional strategies we used were collaborative learning. Uh, we used formative assessment through the 321 exit ticket, and we also used visual, auditory, and kinesthetic instruction during the learning throughout the lesson. We wanted to make sure collaborative learning was fun and engaging, allowing them the freedom to kind of walk around and not only pick their groups at random, but then as we switch groups around, and having them involved in different sports, I think made for great lively discussions. The 321 exit ticket showed us what they learned, as well as what they were able to comprehend and share with others. And the visual and auditory kinesthetic instructions allow for multiple means of engagement and multiple means of access to the information throughout the lesson. We did this in the gym. We practiced this in the gym. I'm sorry, we used the projector in the gym and the sound system in the gym. We also used the vast majority of Google Classroom as a resource to post instructions, to post access to the resource pages like our vocab wall, our psychological aspects wall, of things to be able to be defined and referenced as they continue through the lesson. We use the fitness gram instructions on YouTube through the link, and we also use a 321 exit ticket worksheet that I came up with that highlighted the three definitions. Two psychological aspects felt during the test, either before, during, or after, or all three, as well as one thing that they can improve on. Adaptations would be maybe using or incorporating assistive technology, giving more audible instruction, as well as maybe do more modeling on specific things within the test range. I thought visual aids were used and the timers were used, help the students kind of navigate the lesson and make it flow smoother. That's definitely something I want to incorporate down the road in other lessons. I felt the UDL supports that were built into the lesson through multiple means of engagement and multiple means of access to things using Google Classroom as well as using worksheets allow for the lesson to tie in together and kind of stick a little bit easier. It also helped the kids kind of lessen their anxieties about completing the lesson if they didn't make, say, the goal of meeting 42, buzzer sounds for the pacer. They were still able to contribute to the lesson and complete the lesson by the accesses available in Google Classroom as well as in person, and through their group discussions, continued their encouragement to complete the lesson. So, how will I support students to connect to the content from previous learning? Best supports to our students' connection to the content is highlighting the areas in which their cardiovascular helps them day in, day out. This is through their routine activities they do, through, like I said, if they're athletes, how cardiovascular health only improves and enhances their endurance in their sport, how health can improve or deteriorate based on their approach to physical activity. We got a lot of video game era students and video game era kids who want it fast. They want it done quickly. There's a lot of people in this generation now, if there's something physically wrong with them, they take a pill to try and fix it. Or if they don't like their appearance physically, they go to a surgeon if need be and get it fixed or done the way that they hope to be done and look, to give them a sense of value or self-worth. which is good for mental health, purposes, but it's not always feasible for everybody. So if you start young and build a lifestyle based on good eating, clean routines and activities within your exercising and getting some sort of activity and being active in the day can only enhance your lifestyle and longevity within it. So with that being said, that kind of concludes the lesson for me this week. Um, Again, I know we are coming off of Thanksgiving, so a pacer test might be perfect for your students as we kind of go to kind of snap back to reality here. But it was something that I wanted to do, and I felt that it came together very quickly for us. It was a nice, easy flow. The students really gravitated toward it as we continued to do this and develop this in multiple classes. My first class I did it, there were some things like the recording was off a little bit. Some of the students were kind of hesitant at first, but as they engaged in the content, they got a little bit better with it. Um, that also helped sharpen me up in terms of understanding, hey, like let's not have too much dead time or dead period time in between transitioning. What does the transition look like? What are the things that I can offer them to transition to? So if you have students who are out sick or there's students who, hey, I didn't meet the 42 goal, I'm gonna stop at 20. Like, what are they doing? What are the things that they can do to stay engaged? Do we have them sit down? Do we have them immediately go to their results? Do we have them start their cool down? Like, what are some of the ideas that um, would come to me that came to me throughout the development of the lesson, which I felt was really good and helped set a tone for future lessons. So I appreciate you guys' time. Hopefully, it doesn't take up too much of the time today, but I appreciate you guys' flexibility with me. And hopefully, we get a win today, and you guys can be in the know about that as we celebrate getting ready to go toward December. It's crazy. The year's about to be done, but 2024, 25, here we come. So I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much for your time, and God bless you guys. Have a nice one.